Agribusiness. Brought to you by Bank of New Zealand. Committed to agri for more than 160 years. With over 100 agribusiness partners across the country, BNZ is local and ready to support your business through the seasons.
Well, energy resilience has very much become part and parcel of our vocabulary and our narrative of what we're talking about in the primary sector, since there's so much volatility around the world with petrol and diesel, both prices and supply. It's sort of put a real lens on the competitive nature for New Zealand's processing and behind the farm gate on our reliance. So we're talking here in the BNZ Agribusiness segment today with the Head of Customer and Industry Insights for Agriculture, Pete Savage, about how we continue to build this resilience. Pete, this conversation doesn't seem to be letting up. What are you hearing around the industry and from farmers in particular about how to better position our industry for resilience?
Yeah, great to be back. Thanks, Sarah. Look, you know, the conversation, as you say, hasn't let up at all. We've probably learned a lot more about the energy sector than we ever thought we would. You know, one of the primary things, you think this is just a petrol story. New Zealand uses about 8 million litres a day of petrol, but actually, you know, in our sector, it probably comes as no surprise. It really is around diesel. Diesel's about 11 million litres a day, so actually in excess of petrol, and a lot of that is around transport and around agriculture and processing and the like. So really important. Look, on farm itself, you know, we understand the average farmer, it's about 5 to 20%, depending on if you're a sort of a dairy or a sheep and beef farmer or an arable or cropping farmer, of your costs. And farmers, look, we know farmers are really good at managing variability and costs. What they're not so great at is managing if that tap actually runs dry. And fortunately, we haven't got to that point, but we are seeing, you know, pretty significant volatility.
Oh, well, it's certainly adding to the bottom line, even just simply the cost, isn't it? Very helpful with the recent budget that there is more in there for reserves. But, you know, like, actually, why not capitalize on this conversation around how do we become more efficient? It's one of the real highlights on farm. One of the other things that's popped up recently is the government's new gas transition loan guarantee scheme, potentially targeting the processing and manufacturing side of our sector. But on farm, where are we utilising large amounts of gas and that we can transition away?
Yeah, interesting. It's worth stepping back because gas is actually a structural shortage issue. You know, the shortage of gas in New Zealand isn't actually tied to the issue in Iran. You know, our understanding, MB put out some information that around $1.8 billion have been spent in the last year on drilling 58 wells, you know, to prospect for new gas, and those have all essentially, we haven't even maintained the reserves that we have. So there's a structural shortage of gas. And where does that show up in the agricultural space? Not necessarily on farm, but in that processing. And that can be actually relatively small scale. You know, you think about seed drying, you know, vegetable processing, some wineries. On farm itself, commercial greenhouses. In fact, I was out with on a pig farm yesterday. They have obviously the barn and keeping the piglets warm, and then the ventilation system associated with the sows shed. And they use around $5,000 a month of energy on that particular farm. So gas can show up in the agricultural space pretty strongly.
I was also thinking on dairy farms, the coolant units as well. There's a lot of things there that in aspects of gas, whether it's not just pure gas, there's also byproducts that are resonating, that are having an impact with gas that we will need to transform away from as well. So Pete, how does BNZ play a role in this?
Yeah, so the government's gas transition loan guarantee scheme, which has recently been announced, you know, that means the government, you know, will back up to 80% government guarantee for loans, the loans provided by the bank and around transition, and that has certain parameters around it. So you need to be using about 1,000 gigajoules of gas per year, which sounds like a big number, but actually, you know, an average house that uses gas is about 20 gigajoules. So it's only 40 houses. So that example of the pig farm, you know, they would qualify $5,000 a month or about $60,000 a year in gas would qualify you for that scheme. And a government back guarantee means the bank can be really competitive around pricing for a transition. It's similar if you think back to our COVID times. If we dare think back to COVID, and at that point in time there was the business funding guarantee scheme that the central government had in market, around businesses that have been affected by COVID, and that was a really good product that was taken up across the market. And BNZ, as New Zealand's biggest business bank, was actually one of the biggest, or the biggest provider of those facilities. So, this government gas transition loan is something that we're really excited to talk to our customers about.
And an example of that piggery, what would they be transitioning and how would they be setting up their new energy resilient systems around?
Yeah, so the scheme itself, it indicates you've got to reduce your exposure to gas by about 15% or in excess of 15%. So they may look at ways of being more efficient with their use, or these facilities, be it a vegetable processing or the like, may actually move away from gas in entirety. They may go to sort of, a hot water heat pump type system, which is electricity, or maybe a boiler, fired by biomass or the like. So it's around reducing your exposure and transitioning to something else to provide that energy, often in the form of heat.
On the diesel topic, what sort of conversations are you hearing with on farm that farmers can take away from in terms of learning to be more resilient on energy?
Yeah, look, I think it's a matter of just providing some planning ahead. We have, unfortunately, in a market like this, we've heard of an uptick of theft on farm, which is pretty sad. And so, being aware in terms of the storage of fuel on farm, and particularly, even in vehicles themselves. But also, where there is opportunity to reduce that exposure to diesel, and we're not saying that we're going to get this wholesale change to electrification on farm. That in the larger machinery, that's some way away. But in the smaller scale kit, we are seeing some level of electrification. And also, there is some opportunity on farms for things like solar and the like. So it's worth it. It's worth a consideration and a conversation for sure.
Pete, it has been really interesting actually watching the evolution of the conversation around sort of farm management, and that sustainability used to be sort of like a nice to have, or potentially what our markets want, but around this energy resilience, it really is a tangible kind of win from a business operational expense to become energy resilient. When your agri-bankers are having conversations with farmers leading into, some planning for next season, how is it materially showing up, these options that they have now around solar and energy efficiency of use?
Look, in the past, diesel on farm was probably like Wi-Fi for you and I. It's just there.
Yeah.
It works. You pay the bill whether you'd like to or not. But as soon as it turns off, or as soon as it's some sort of restriction in supply, we can't fundamentally do our business. So I think it's taken it from something that's just a line item to something that actually they are talking about on farm, and where there is opportunity to be more efficient, or look at processes, or look at potential in terms of their diversification of where their energy comes from. So be it improvement of VAT cooling on farm, or hot water heat pumps, right through to the potential for solar and the like. It's taken it from a line item to something that's definitely a conversation they're having with bankers.
Because we've talked about gas and we've talked about diesel, but also too, I don't think electricity is going to turn back into down in direction anytime soon from a price perspective. That too has got such a microscope over it. So it's just good business to be looking at these things.
Correct. Yeah. It's a good time to think about energy from a resilience point of view.
Well, obviously we're in June now, and we've just had Dairy Day, Moving Day. That would have been a really big time for the bank, I'd imagine.
Yeah, sure. Look, we've seen increased volumes on last year. Yet to see if it's a record year, but certainly was a busy busy time for us. And look, shout out to those people who have moved across the country into new farms and new communities. We really hope that they get a chance to sort of take stock, maybe take a little bit of a break before we get into calving.
So if you'd like BNZ to support you with your farming business, search BNZ Agribusiness to find a banker near you. There's more than 100 BNZ Agri bankers across the country to be right where you are. Thank you so very much, Pete, for joining us.
Out on the farm, the right support goes a long way. Speak to your local BNZ agribusiness partner for insight and expertise you need to farm through the seasons.